Thanks again for everyone for joining us today. Now, first, I will introduce our speakers who are also members of the Program Operator Consortium. So first there's myself, Amber Jakovich. I'm a business unit manager within NSF Sustainability Department, and I manage NSF Sustainable Product, Service, and Facility Level Certification Programs, Product Transparency Programs, and Green Chemistry Programs. Chris Surak is the Director of Certification Programs at ASTM. He has a bachelor's degree in Sustainable Biomaterials from Virginia Tech. At ASTM, he directs the operations of their recently created Department for Product and Personnel Certification, as well as Environmental Product Declarations. Steve Thorsell is the Director of Environmental Programs for ICC Evaluation Service. In his current position, he's involved in the evaluation of environmental attributes of construction materials and development of environmental product declaration and category rules. Terry Swack is the founder and CEO of Sustainable Minds, a B2B cloud provider of environmental product transparency applications, data, and services to help product manufacturers design and market greener products. Terry is an internet and environmental entrepreneur and a pioneer in customer experience strategy. Here's the agenda for our webinar today. I will quickly review who the members of the Program Operator Consortium are, why we were founded, and what our goals are. Chris, Steve, and Terry will go into a little bit more about detail about these goals, what we've been doing, and also the value and benefit of what the Program Operator Consortium brings. With the proliferation of program operators, complex recording requirements, and an increased demand for these services, the members of the Program Operator Consortium recognize the value of pooling our resources, jointly conducting outreach, education, and communication, and promoting the overall use of PCRs, LCAs, and EPDs in the marketplace. So we decided to form the Program Operator Consortium in 2015, and we did a formal launch at Greenville 2015. The Program Operator Consortium is made up of 3 standards developers and 1 design technology company, ASTM, ICC-ES, NSF, and Sustainable Minds. The members of the Program Operator Consortium are all program operators with established programs in conformance with ISO 14025, and many of the members also have ANSI eligibility for these programs. The members of the consortium provide services ranging from product category rule development to reviewing life cycle assessment reports and verifying EPDs and offering next generation Type 3 environmental declarations like Sustainable Mind transparency reports. The consortium strives to reduce the complexity in the marketplace by aligning around a common set of LCA calculation rules and reporting requirements, as well as assisting users in their understanding of environmental considerations for products and materials. And this webinar will largely focus around the alignment that we've done in this area. The combined efforts of the members will amplify the sharing, uniformity, and recognition of manufacturers' product transparency work and provide value to the decision maker when specifying these materials and products. Currently, the Program Operator Consortium is made up of these 4 members. Like any startup, we wanted to get started with just a few like-minded companies, and the Program Operator Consortium will consider adding new members after an initial operating period. I'm sure many of you are aware of the work that our organizations do, but I wanted to quickly mention that all of the members of the Program Operator Consortium have other programs in sustainability and environmental services as well. PCR development and EPD verifications are a few of these activities, but we also develop sustainable product standards and certify sustainable products, have other product transparency programs, provide verifications to programs like Energy Star and WaterSense, among many other offerings. We were initially thinking about the concept to create the Program Operator Consortium. We looked at what was happening within the product transparency marketplace. We determined that the main reason to form was to reduce complexity in the marketplace and to standardize how reporting of environmental performance is done. So when the Program Operator Consortium was founded, we went back to the goals and objectives of ISO 14025 to help inform the goals for this group and to identify what we could best do with our combined efforts. First, we took note in ISO 14025 that it's important to consider the information needs of different purchasers and user groups, along with paying due attention to the level of awareness of the target audience. So 14025 also mentions to ensure comparability, program operators are encouraged to work cooperatively to achieve harmonization of the programs and to develop mutual recognition agreements. This is a key factor in the development of the program operator consortium to come together, to work together. The overall goal of a Type 3 environmental declaration is to encourage the demand for and supply of those products that cause less stress on the environment through communication of verifiable and accurate information that is not misleading, thereby stimulating the potential for market-driven continuous environmental improvement. So with the goals and objectives of ISO 14025 in mind, the Program Operator Consortium solidified our commitment to provide simple and standardized, more useful solutions. And so we're going to be your expert resource and advocate for standardized product category rules, reviewing life cycle assessment reports, and verifying and publishing your choice of Type 3 environmental declarations, EPDs, or sustainable mine transparency reports. Another of our main goals is to provide more useful environmental product transparency solutions and to reduce complexity in the marketplace. Standardizing how LCA standards for reporting product environmental performance get created, providing improved reports which will help decision makers specify materials and products, and by combining efforts to improve access and recognition to the manufacturer's product and transparency reports. We'll also be providing consortium branding, educational programs, participating in key industry events, and providing a single resource to the marketplace in the form of a website, which we'll go over in more detail today. What we found through all this work of the consortium is that what the market really wants and needs is products with better environmental performance, not just products that have reports. So once the Program Operator Consortium is working together to help drive this change, and once this occurs, everyone will benefit, from manufacturers to industry associations, LCA providers, AEC decision makers, and green building rating systems. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who'll be reviewing a little bit more about how the Program Operator Consortium operates and our alignment efforts.
Thank you, Amber. So let's walk through a typical process of developing a PCR or getting it revised, as well as walking through the life cycle assessment report or the background report, as Amber had indicated, as well as these two options for the environmental product declaration itself. So the product category rules, or the PCR, I hope everybody's familiar with, but basically they're the guidelines around developing an end result is the environmental product declaration. These guidelines align the different products as well as what's needed inside of these reports that are needed for the data process of the life cycle assessment. So the way the consortium, and again, this greater communication, this greater working together is, and we'll get to the catalogs here in a couple minutes, but what this will allow us to do, as well as you as a manufacturer, is if there is not an applicable PCR available for your product, or one is expiring from the catalog that's out there or the available out there, this will allow the PCR, the organization or manufacturer can contact the consortium or any of the individual members to begin the process of either developing or revising the PCR that's out there. And all the consortium members are still individual business entities. So while we are a consortium, you can work with any of us, develop a PCR, or get your LCA review, or your EPD, or your transparency report. We'll discuss those in the coming slides. So what you might choose while contacting the consortium is that you might have existing relationships with any of us as organizations. Each one of the pricing could be different. Each one of the contracting could be different. Each one of the templates and development styles could be slightly different. And anybody that's worked in the rounds of international standards know there's some application and interpretation leeway. So each one, we want you to have a comfort level when you come to the consortium, which organization you might choose. But as Amber noted, while we're aligning around a common set of life cycle assessment, which I'll get to in the next slide, this again, this working together has a lot of advantages. One, the increased communication between program operators and aligning with what's out there, what's available, what might be needed by the actual manufacturers. And then during the development cycle, there's processes of review, public review, comment period, etc. We're going to share all that notification and alignment, which will lead to greater, robust product category rules around more common areas. So let's dive deeper into this alignment. Again, there are a number of international standards as well as some individual regional standards, guidance, etc., and it seems to be increasing constantly of what might be needed out there. And each individual program operator can interpret or use or align to certain of these aspects. But what we did as a consortium was align around really the foundation of the ISO 14000 series of international standards. And we've come around the Sustainable Mines Part A. And what this does is allow us to come around a common set of LCA calculation rules. And this is important, as any of us that deal with these international standards, as I mentioned, that they could vary as far as the interpretation and implementation of them. So this gives a commonality, a consistentness around it. By participating and aligning around the foundation, Part A allows for the flexibility in using appendices to also align around ISO 21930 for building products, EN 15804, and some of the guidelines that keep coming out, such etc. What we can continue to do with this living document is implement these appendices that it always is fresh, always is updated, always allows us to use that as the common touch point. So it gives us a nimble, solid foundation that allows all four of us to operate on those principles. And when we have relationships with you as the client or manufacturer, it allows us to focus on your product-specific application and not have to revisit or redo a lot of that work, which allows for a very streamlined, much more nimble, potentially quicker operation to develop the PCRs that everybody wants. So the second part of this, when a PCR is used to develop a life cycle assessment or background report, this streamlining and accelerating the process allows any of the manufacturers out there that you can work again with each one of the program operators, whatever you're more comfortable with once you contact the consortium, whatever the pricing, whatever the individual application, template use, etc. for developing that LCA report, that is completely up to you. But again, because we're around a common set, it allows some more commonality between each one of the program operators. What we will touch on in the coming slides about the catalog is that those listings now will be in one place for benchmarking and visibility. As well, we have the LCA report. The application or the final product of a declaration report, now we have multiple options, as Amber noted. You can develop a standardized environmental product declaration back to the consortium for the verification of that. But then there's an option to develop a transparency report or a more dynamic application of that, and we'll get that in the next couple slides. But what I'd like to do is turn it over to Steve Forcell with ICC-ES to kind of go over a couple of the options.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, the next couple slides that I'll walk through with you, Chris mentioned, we're still going to maintain our individual programs' identities, but we're going to be working under a core set of principles. And you'll see in the next couple of slides are samples, mock-ups of what the video producing and how we will be identifying the program operator consortium recognition within that. And this is a sample of a product category rule, PCR rule for NSF sustainability. You'll notice in the bottom left where there's the red arrow indicates being a member of the program operator consortium. Next, this is a sample of a product category rule that was used by ICC Evaluation Service and ASTM International. Again, you'll note the red arrow at the lower bottom that indicates that it's a member of the Program Operators Consortium. This is a sample of an EPD cover page. Again, you'll notice in the lower left where the red arrow is indicating that ASTM, when they produce this, as a member of the Program Operator Consortium. So this is what you would expect to see in documents, whether they be PCRs or EPDs, produced by the members of the Program Operator Consortium. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Terry for the next portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Chris. A question already came up, and to clarify that question, yes, Sustainable Minds Part A will be the basis for all LCA reports and their corresponding transparency reports or EPDs for all consortium members. That's what it means that we're aligning around a core set of LCA calculation rules and reporting requirements. And we just showed you that document a few slides ago, and you can go to the website and download it, take a read through it. Because it gets updated every year, as Chris mentioned, the intent is to always stay aligned and harmonized with what's happening in international standards and guidelines, other relevant guidance documents. The Technical Advisory Board that maintains Part A is comprised of members from the Program Operator Consortium, representatives from each member, as well as manufacturers and LCA service providers who are experts in their field to be able to maintain a standard that will be used broadly across North America. The big thing that we believe that we're going to be offering to the market is ultimately creating tools that support manufacturers and all the participants in the process to go through the process more efficiently, but ultimately to deliver better and more useful Type 3 environmental declarations. Because ultimately, the PCR, the LCA, they're all a means to an end, which is to deliver information into the marketplace that can be used by the intended audience. As we pointed out, the standard is very clear. In fact, it's in the second paragraph of the introduction. Pay attention to the users of the information and to the audience and make that information consumable and relevant to them. And that is really number one on our agenda. A key part of Part A is Appendix C, which is the content requirements now for a transparency report or an EPD. And this is a pretty important advantage. When we created this Appendix C, the content requirements, initially for a transparency report, which is our brand of EPD, Sustainable Minds brand of EPD, we started looking at this 3 years ago. We spent a lot of time looking at the standard, looking at the kinds of content required to be in a Type 3 environmental declaration and the kind of content that is optionally can be included. We came up with effectively a recipe for the content requirements of what would create a useful and compelling Type 3 environmental declaration. And so these 3 pages, Appendix C, go through the different types of content required and are optional. Not only did we identify what those content requirements are, we even wrote some guidance about the quality of that content for it to be good or effective. Now notice this content requirements list is just that. It's a list. It's not the layout of a report. It's not the format of the report. It's simply the contents that are required and suggested to be in the report. But what we paid significant attention to is the amount of life cycle assessment information that would be included in a Type 3 environmental declaration, again, which is a market-facing report or tool. And our filter was that any life cycle assessment information that goes into a market-facing tool must pass the test of how environmental impact is getting explained and what the manufacturer is doing to make the product better. So we're very clear about what information belongs in the LCA report. And by the way, a copy of an edited or redacted report is supposed to be made available, and that is part of the requirement in Part A, so that people don't feel compelled to put all that content into the Type 3 environmental declaration, which kind of renders the declaration increasingly less useful because it's full of content that really nobody needs or understands that is in the LCA report. So our version of a Type 3 environmental declaration, a Sustainable Mines Transparency Report. And by the way, in the introduction of 14025, it says a program operator can call their report anything they like. And so we called ours a transparency report. Our insight to improving the current state of Type 3 environmental declarations was to integrate product transparency into product marketing for manufacturers to be able to deliver all the information somebody would need to make a purchase decision all in one place, rather than segregating a lot of technical reporting information in one kind of technical report and then delivering all the other information that people use to make decisions about a product like functional performance, cost, aesthetics, safety, all those other things. Rather than keep them separate, let's put them in one place and deliver the information in a way that is consumable by the intended user. When we did a significant research study of the EPD landscape about 3 years ago now, we looked at about 40 different kinds of EPDs from all over the world in different product categories from different manufacturers. We looked at things that weren't Type 3 environmental declarations, but were being used as a stand-in for those. We looked at all kinds of things and said, look, nobody has time to read 40 pages, 30 pages, 15 pages, 7 pages. Look, everything somebody needs to know can be done in 2 pages, and page 3 can be optional. So page 1 of the transparency report has functional performance, environmental performance information. And by the way, this is a cloud-based report, which means that all the data that's in the report is going to be able to be reused as we look at larger applications and requirements for environmental performance information going forward, being used in other tools and other kinds of calculations. Page 2 has the LCA results and interpretation. And here is where the manufacturer can start talking about what they're doing to improve the product and make these results and interpretation even a little bit more meaningful. And page 3, again, which is optional, is probably the most interesting because it's where the manufacturer can talk about what they're actually doing in any or all stages of the product's life cycle, contributing to the performance improvements that they may be pointing out over here. So we are really achieving the intent of 14025, which is to communicate information that's not that can't be misinterpreted. It is verified information to drive preference for products that are improving or lessening the impacts to the environment. So when we first developed the transparency report, we said, look, it was part of our 2-part PCR framework. So Part A, as I already showed you, has Appendix C, which is the requirements for content in a transparency report. But we felt that any manufacturer using any PCR, because there's already a lot of PCRs that exist, should have a choice, that they should be able to create a marketing tool with their environmental performance information and have that choice versus only the option of a technical disclosure. And so we created a tool to call our compatibility appendix to be able to identify the content that's required in that PCR, any PCR, that is not required by Appendix C in Part A. And the point is then that the manufacturer can choose which kind of report to deliver to the market, and we're ensuring that the LCA calculation rules and the reporting content are the same, but just the format is different. But it turns out this analysis tool is really important to be able to analyze today's state of EPD content requirements and looking at every existing PCR, emerging guidance documents, standards, and being able to look at who is the audience, what of the content that's being required is useful to that audience, and how are they going to use it, and again, to identify content required by that PCR that's not required in Part A, so that can get verified to that PCR. So here's an example. This is a real-life example. This is how it got started. You've seen Toto's transparency reports, and we created a transparency report for their laboratory sinks, which were already included in the sanitary ceramics PCR from UL Environment. So what we did was we took the UL Environment sanitary ceramics Part B and literally went through the content requirements, the Appendix C content requirements for each section, and compared the requirements for Part A and the requirements from UL's Part B to see what additional content was going to be required to be in the transparency report so that it could be verified to that PCR. So this transparency report is verified to the UL PCR. What we also did at the same time was start to look at how much content in various PCRs was taken directly from the requirements of EN 15804, how much was overlapping, how much was in addition, and we've done this now for 5 different PCRs. I think we've actually done a few more, as well as a number of international standards. But as you can see, the additional amount of content required to be, for the transparency report to be verified to the UL PCR filled up an entire additional page, which isn't even a regular page. It's a really long page. This is a web page, which really begs the question, how much content is required for a market-facing document, given that all of this is actually in the LCA itself? So if a Type 3 environmental declaration is a report of a report, then how much content should be in that report that makes it useful for the end users? So with all that in mind, we came together and we kind of liked the description. 3 standards developers and a design technology and innovation company, and somebody actually asked who are the 3 standards developers. That's going to be ASTM, ICC-ES, and NSF. We are all program operators, but we, Sustainable Minds, don't develop any other standards other than those. And really felt like there's a lot of visibility that, and really transparency, that isn't available to manufacturers and other stakeholders in the industry in the way that program operation happens today. And part of what we really wanted to do was get our arms around what is the state of program operation today, who's doing what, how are they doing it, and again, because we do want to stay aligned with what's happening in the marketplace, but to make it simpler for folks by really implementing best practices and ultimately being able to scale the creation of product transparency information again, to, as Amber pointed out, not just create more reports, but to help manufacturers create demand for their products that really do have improved environmental performance. So I invite you all to go to the website, programaoperators.org. You can scan the catalog. It's freely available. It's continuously updated. We update it at least once a month. And this first catalog that I'm showing you is all of the EPDs or transparency reports created by the members of the Program Operators Consortium. If you go to the website, you can see that we have all of the CSI master format division codes in place, and that's how it's organized. That's the primary organizing factor. With the manufacturers, these link directly to the EPDs or the transparency reports. There's an indicator if it's an industry average or a product-specific report, the LCA scope, who is the program operator, and then, real importantly, the expiration date. And we've heard repeatedly from AEC professionals that it's really challenging to stay on top of the validity dates of disclosures, and making that information more accessible would be very useful. Now, the second catalog is the North American PCR catalog, and again, both of these catalogs are freely available. They are updated at least once a month. The Program Operator Consortium, EPD, PCR, EPD, Transparency Report catalog gets updated every time a new report gets verified. We also, if something slips through the cracks, please contact us. We'll add it. The link right here in the form sends that information directly to the Technical Advisory Board contact, and then it gets posted. And same thing here with the North American PCR catalog. So here we tried to do a pretty comprehensive and exhaustive search of all the North American PCRs that we could find from all the program operators that we could find. And we're looking to you, those of you in the industry, please look. If there is something that we haven't included, let us know. We'll add it immediately. There's like really no delay. We're doing it now in Google Docs for the purposes of making it really easy to maintain. It's not a lot of content yet, so it really is. It can be very quick. And again, you can see how many PCRs by master format there are, who is the program operator, a direct link to the PCR, and again the expiration date or the validity period. And we did it because two things. One, we felt if we're going to form and call ourselves the Program Operator Consortium, there are probably some obligations that go along with that title, which are this: to provide a service to the marketplace and have it be not only freely available, but have it be curated. What are the things people are going to want to know about these PCRs? And this is just version 1. We're really going to look to you in the marketplace about at a high level, what are you going to want to know, and what would you expect to find in a curated PCR catalog? And then the second, obviously, was to just understand what's going on today. How many are there? How are they being done? And the challenges that we've all run up against in the last few years since there's been more demand. How are those challenges showing up in the results? So what we learned by the time we went live a couple weeks ago, we were able to find 51 PCRs from 9 different program operators, each who have different programs. Because we pulled up the validity period and called that out as an attribute, we discovered that there are 14 of the 51 that have either already expired or will be expiring in 2016. 10 of those 14 are addenda to European PCRs. Of the 35 master format divisions, only 15 of those divisions, so it's fewer than half, have PCRs created for some of the product groups or subdivisions within those divisions. So all that to say, there really are not a lot of PCRs, and we all know that's the starting point to product transparency. There aren't a lot of PCRs, and a fair number of the ones that do exist are expiring, and we're going to go into that a little bit more. They were only intended to be temporary PCRs. So, the kind of overarching challenge in the way PCRs get developed today is that different program operators, different types of organizations started ISO 14025 programs and became program operators. You've got industry trade associations, standards developers, LCA professionals, folks like us who are software companies with LCA expertise. And because of where each type of organization kind of originated, they all have their different program rules. And depending upon how each PCR process was facilitated, some of those rules might be used differently. And so even PCRs from the same program operator may not be comparable in the rules that get included, and they're certainly not comparable in the requirements for the content that go into the EPD. That actually is almost the most variability that we saw looking across all these PCRs, which is the greatest impact to the end user, the folks who need to use these things to specify products. There's just tremendous variability in these end results. And finally, and everybody's heard this, that because there is no kind of overarching body, or there hasn't been overseeing PCR development, there really hasn't been any way to create awareness in a particular industry or cross industries of PCRs that are in development, or if they're coming up for renewal, is anybody going to do anything about it, and when, and who's supposed to take charge, and manufacturers who would like to get started because there isn't a PCR yet, or there's PCRs that may be applicable to other products in their industry, but not really directly applicable to theirs. The rules don't really fit. They're really not sure actually how to get started. And so we want to actually take away all of that confusion, really be transparent about who's doing what, when's it happening, allow people to be engaged in consultation, and again, to produce reports that are consistent, that end users will find usable. I want to dig into a little bit about the process of creating addenda to European PCRs, and I want to put this in the context of when a customer shows up and says, I really want to get this done, I don't know how, please help me. As a service provider, you're going to do what you can to help your customer. And I want to put that in this context because this is organizations responding to customer requests. And, PCRs have taken a long time to create. People don't want to spend a lot of money. They don't want to take a lot of time. They wanted to get started. There is some advantage to being first. And so an efficient way to do that has been to look to Europe, use a Part B from a two-part program, and update it so that it can be used in North America. The challenge, though, with many of the appendices that we evaluated is that it's hard to manage a lot of content creation and keep it consistent and current and up to date and make sure the rules are consistent. And so we found a lot of inconsistency in these appendices. A lot of them had drafts still watermarked on their pages. Validity dates were confusing. Some of the appendices had been created for PCRs that had already expired, or we could no longer find the PCR that it was appending. The expiration dates of the appendices didn't seem to align with the expiration dates of the PCRs, and all of them had variations on a statement about the fact that really it was an addendum, it wasn't meant to be permanent. It could get replaced with a North American PCR if one was created. And further, there was another statement that had some variability saying that while it was based on a European PCR, it had been adapted to North America by making changes to it, and there was a list of these are the kinds of changes that could be made to it, but not limited to it. And while there was that statement, there was no evidence that any of these appendices had been developed with the involvement of any North American interested parties. So, like I said, it's a way to respond to customer requests. We all do what we can to do that. But it opened a lot of questions for the industry going forward, which is, and these are the kind of the research questions that the consortium will continue to work on, and will strive to take the results and have them show up in our solutions and our service delivery. So that the number one is how much LCA content should be in an EPD, and further questions like, all right, well, when and why is full compliance with EN 15804 required? Same question, when and why is full compliance with ISO 21930 required? And again, it's the intent of the manufacturer, considering its audience, the regionality of the deliverable. But let's be clear about that. When and why is that going to be useful? Really getting clear on what's the content that an AEC professional needs to make a better informed purchase decision. And if they're going to be using environmental performance information, LCA-based environmental performance information, I actually believe it's incumbent in part on us to help the market understand how to use it, to make those decisions, particularly with whole building LCA on the horizon. You kind of have to walk before you can run. How are they supposed to use LCA results to make decisions about products? And ultimately, those of us, or those of you who are LCA practitioners, know that you can't add stuff up into a total unless the subparts were created in a common way. So, that panacea of getting to whole building LCA will be based on the industry getting organized around doing LCAs and producing LCA results and Type 3 environmental declarations to deliver consistent information. We're also going to continue to look at the challenges for manufacturers to stay up to date with different programs, standards, and guidance. So this is in large part going to be part of our educational programs. And that dovetails directly into the difficulties for people, whether they're LCA service providers or people that manufacturers are developing inside their organizations to operationalize data creation and data development for doing LCAs. Those folks are never going to be experts. They're going to become proficient at using LCA tools, acquiring data, being able to build models. But, you know, those folks really aren't ever going to become proficient or expert at interpretation, writing reports, and ultimately creating Type 3 environmental declarations. And we've heard, this is one quote we've heard variations of repeatedly, that even from LCA practitioner service providers, that it's difficult to interpret many of the PCRs and know whether all the requirements are being satisfied, which leads then directly into the verification process. You know, with so much inconsistency, it's continually challenging for verifiers to verify LCAs if every single one of them is unique in format and in order. And then further, the same thing with EPDs. More challenging for verifiers to efficiently verify EPDs. And both of those things translate into costs for manufacturers. You know, the more challenging it is to do an LCA, if each one is unique, it's going to take more time, obviously more cost. Verification will remain more expensive, as will both types of verification. So, you know, to wrap up about the value and benefits that Program Operator Consortium can bring you, starting with the value of PCR alignment. Part A was based on rules, international rules, but created for North America from the ground up. It was not a European Part A that was rewritten or retrofitted for North America. It was written for North America from the ground up and is extensible for international purposes. It's now possible to efficiently and in a streamlined way create North American PCRs, whether they're new or to renew expiring ones without relying on repurposing European Part Bs. And using this process and this PCR alignment, you're guaranteed that you're going to have deliverables that are going to make decision-making easier for your end user. They don't understand why EPDs are different, and they especially don't know how to use the information, and then particularly what of that information can be compared today and what information cannot be compared and maybe can never be compared. And we're going to have to come up with some answers for that. So manufacturers and industry associations and LCA providers who are giving guidance to industry associations and manufacturers, you have a choice of program operators, and you also have a choice of programs. And now, understanding the rules of the program is what should inform the decision of which program operator to work with. No one owns a PCR. Once that PCR is out in the marketplace, that is a public document. Who is responsible for updating it? Manufacturers can get together to update it. Industry trade associations can get together to update it. The initial program operator who created it at the behest of the industry is unlikely to update it on their own without some request from the industry. So you have a choice. You can choose now a program that now you understand the implications of the process and the deliverables that you're going to get. And further, it's important to know that, over time, and let's say that's the next 3 to 5 years, more manufacturers than not will have some kind of Type 3 environmental declaration. So just having them is no longer going to be a differentiator. They need to do more work. So it brings us back to really, the value proposition for everyone. What the market really wants and needs is higher performing products that are actually greener, not just reports. So if we do our jobs well, we will end up creating preference for those products that actually are higher performing by educating the marketplace to be able to explain what does the information mean, both to the manufacturers and to the end users, to be able to drive that continuous improvement, which will drive behavior change. And everybody benefits. Manufacturers get to leverage their investments to get more purposeful and effective deliverables. Industry associations will be able to play more appropriate guidance roles in facilitating or overseeing the development of PCRs. It'll be easier for LCA providers because there will be standardized rules to make it easier to deliver. Certainly the AEC decision makers are going to benefit because they're going to get information that they'll be able to understand, and then to reward manufacturers for making actually higher performing products with transparent results. And the big winner ultimately are the green building rating systems, who are the ones who put this ball into play, because there will be more products with transparency information to award decision makers for purchasing and specifying them into buildings that will actually be greener buildings. That's the bottom line. So that brings us to the end of our presentation, and we'll take some questions now, and I'm going to turn it back to Amber.
Sure, great. Thanks, Terry. And it looks like we only have a few minutes left, and we have gotten quite a few questions, so we will try to get through as many as we can. And if we unfortunately don't get to your question on the webinar, we will get in touch with you personally to discuss your question. So Terry, I am going to stick with you on this one. We have received quite a few questions regarding the new programaoperators.org website and the PCR and EPD catalog. So the first question, and I have about 5, is will EPDs from other program operators outside of the consortium be included in the catalog?
The answer to that is the intent is certainly, like any other project, we have to do it in a phased approach. So consider this our minimum viable product. This is what we got to market first.
Great. And then there are questions about the PCRs, and I'll do all of them at once. How can you get a PCR included? How frequently will the catalog be updated? And are only North American PCRs being included, or are there plans to expand this internationally? So a 3-part question for you.
Right. Okay. So building on the last question, we're just getting started, and so of course we would want to make the PCR catalog as useful and as comprehensive as possible. And so yes, we will continue to expand it, and certainly input from industry will help us take an appropriate phased approach. How would you like it to work? How would you like to see it? Now we do update it, every month at least. On our own, we go out and check. But like I said, if we haven't included one or one gets finished we don't know about, please let us know. There's a link right in the catalog. Just email us and we'll add it. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Terry. And this takes us right up to 3 o'clock, our ending time. So once again, if we did not get to your question, we will get in touch with you. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, our recording of this will be placed on programaoperators.org. So we appreciate everyone sticking with us, and we look forward to talking with more of you soon. Thank you.